What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about Hellions number 10 by Zeb Wells and Steven Segovia, and we are going to learn exactly why Mastermind betrayed Krakoa and sold out the Hellions to assassin extraordinaire and murder world entrepreneur Arcade, exactly what he has cooked up for the Hellions themselves, and more importantly, what Arcade wants from Mr. Sinister. We are going to talk about all that and more right now, but first, let's hit that intro.
Word to wise, grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
So when last we left off, Arcade had used the mutant villain Mastermind to trick the Hellions into thinking they were going on some mission to save Mr. Sinister. Lo and behold, he was setting them up for failure because he was leading them into a trap that was laid by the Marvel villain Arcade, an assassin of sorts who started turning his attention toward creating elaborate murder traps to kill his victims because killing someone with a sniper rifle was just too easy. We learn that Arcade has taken incredibly cautious steps in this comic when it comes to making sure that he is getting exactly what he's paid for, because what's going on here is that he is making sure that this entire time that he is dealing with Mr. Sinister and the Hellions, he's making sure that he has someone in place who can confirm that Mastermind isn't duping him. You see, Mastermind, for those not familiar, he is able to psionically breach your mind and create elaborate illusions that feel incredibly real. We saw this in the previous issue with how he was able to dismantle the Hellions and serve them up on a silver platter to Arcade. Well, Arcade is trying to make sure that Mastermind isn't doing the exact same thing to him, and in doing so, he has an agent out there in the field who is thousands of miles away watching from a secure location that Mastermind has no knowledge of, and he is confirming everything that Arcade is doing and seeing. Case in point, why every time Arcade asks a question or does something, he asks for confirmation, and we see a speech bubble that denotes that this is coming in from a radio communication saying confirmed in response. Now, this also is something that is played up for laughs because Mr. Sinister does use this whole system of confirmation to comedic effect throughout this comic. However, the thing that I think really bears talking about is, why did Mastermind, why would he turn on his own kind, considering that for the most part, with the exception of maybe a handful of mutants here or there, pretty much all of the mutants in the Marvel Comics universe have decided that Krakoa was a thing worth working towards, and Mastermind kind of seems like the type of guy who would kind of be a perfect fit in Krakoa, but unfortunately, he has chosen a different path, and the reason why is because Arcade has taken his daughter, Lady Mastermind, hostage and has her in some elaborate Saw-style death trap and is ready to pull the trigger on her and kill her should Mastermind not conform to his request. And what is it exactly that Arcade is requesting? Well, of course, he wants Mastermind to have lured the Hellions there, but he didn't want Mastermind working his magic on Mr. Sinister. He wanted to keep the Hellions out of the way because they knew the Hellions would come looking for Mr. Sinister. Mastermind has placed them in these elaborate tapestries of their mind, where in the case of characters like Quanon, we see her spending time with the secret daughter that we knew she gave up when she joined the Hand. A daughter who has kind of been a large portion of her character backstory since House of X, where we learn that, yeah, she has been trying to get that child back. She's been trying to make up for that lost mistake. This is kind of what painted a lot of her decisions in the pages of Fallen Angels and various other storylines that have come up since then. Now, of course, we know that in the far-flung future, she has a daughter with Forge. This is not the same child that we are talking about. Sora is a character that we probably will not see brought into play for quite some time, if that future even bears fruit or pays dividends down the road. That is something that is kind of a point of contention for a lot of people right now, considering some of the things that just recently happened in Captain Marvel number 26. Well, in the case of Quanon, she is getting that opportunity to spend time with the daughter that she gave up. And this is something that is kind of bringing great happiness to her because this is something she's always wanted, albeit there is something sinister waiting out there for her. Same could be said for some of the other characters. In the case of Grey Crow, we see him back in what appears to be Vietnam, where he murdered a bunch of people to save his platoon, which in this case is, not such a bad thing because he's fighting for freedom. He's fighting to save his fellow soldiers. But at the same time, what he's seeing is his guilt because he's being reminded of the mutant massacre where the Morlocks were all killed. He is seeing their bodies on the floor now as opposed to the people of Vietnam. We also see in the case of Wildchild. Wildchild throws himself into the middle of a fight between Sabretooth and Wolverine, where when Wildchild shows up, Wolverine and Sabretooth basically are like, oh my god, he's the big dog. He's the alpha male. We gotta get the hell out of Dodge. But then that all falls apart eventually because when we come back later, we see that those same characters come back to attack him. Even more interesting in the fact that we see another character added into the fray by the name of Romulus, who God knows does not need to show his ugly face anytime soon ever again in life. We also see that Nanny and Orphan Maker, they have been thrown into the throes of their own illusion, where Nanny is surrounded by all the children she could ever hope to take care of, whereas with Orphan Maker, he's being dragged away from the one person who he has any real meaningful connection to. And of course, we have Empath, who is basically surrounded at a table of people who we're not really sure exactly who they are at first, but we quickly learn that these are all the people who he's ever hurt using his powers. And it's one of those situations where at first it kind of seems like he's like, oh, I don't really care. This isn't anything to me. This is perfect. You're showing me the faces of all the people I've ever hurt. Well, guess what? I'm a sociopath. I don't care. But Empath's being a sociopath only takes him so far when the reality hits him that he can't use his powers in this illusion. The people who are surrounding him, he can't affect. And this is when real genuine terror strikes him right to his core. And of course, last but not least, we have Havoc, who Havoc is reliving his love with Madeline Pryor. This has been a big part of his story since Hellions began, rediscovering what he had with Madeline Pryor and it being taken away from him and him having to decide whether or not it's worth having her around because of how dangerous she can be. And right now, it's almost like it's back to old times. This isn't the Goblin Queen he's looking at. This is Maddie. This is the woman he fell in love with way back in the day before Inferno. But each of them, their illusions, have a certain theme to them, whereas with Quanon's, hers is compassion. The ability to be able to interact with someone else and show genuine affection and love between one another, something that she was robbed of because she gave up her child. Grey Crow's is absolution. He wants forgiveness for the things that he has done. Whereas with Empath, his is satisfaction, basically just being able to do whatever he wants. With Wildchild, his is aggression, and you can even make a strong case for asserting dominance. Whereas Nanny and Orphan Maker, theirs is protection. Protection in terms of Nanny, in terms of protecting all those mutant children, whereas Orphan Maker is the one seeking protection, but is not getting it. And of course, Havoc's is passion, if you couldn't tell. These all quickly fade, especially when Quanon realizes what's really going on. She realizes, wait a minute, this isn't right. Something is not right here. And she asked her daughter a simple question. She asked her, what is her name? What is the child's name? And this is something that my memory on Fallen Angels is very hazy because once again, it was a book I did not particularly enjoy and I really don't have much of a memory of it since then, having been something I haven't read in like a year. However, I don't remember her daughter ever having a name revealed. So this is something that's kind of important, especially considering that I'm pretty sure that Mr. Sinister and Quanon have worked out a deal to where a clone of her daughter can be made, where, this is something that we're still waiting to see pay dividends after all this, is wrapped up. But when Quanon asks this question, the daughter cannot answer. And this causes the entire illusion to come crashing down and turning into some sort of Japanese nightmare, where an evil, wide-eyed version of herself is chasing her down and trying to kill her. This causes Quanon to reach out psychically to Grey Crow, and this is what causes Grey Crow's illusion to fall apart and for him to start seeing the Morlocks he killed during the mutant massacre. Everyone's nightmares become evident, with Wildchild's becoming submission. Havoc's becoming humiliation, Quanen's becoming rejection, Grey Crow's becoming retribution, and Orphan Maker and Nanny's becoming separation. And even though we're not really spending a whole lot of time with the Hellions themselves in this comic, we're actually spending more time with Arcade and Sinister. It is something that's kind of cool to watch because we're getting a little bit of a deeper study into what is going on in these characters' heads and what is it they truly fear. But at the end of it all, what is all this for? What is it exactly that Arcade wants? Well, it's simple. What would anyone want Mr. Sinister for? He wants to be able to make the most sophisticated clones ever in the history of ever. And what will these clones be used for? Well, it's simple. He's going to use them to basically repurpose Murder World. The funny thing about this is, Mr. Sinister does not need to be tortured. He simply agrees to what Arcade wants. The problem is that Arcade appreciates the fact that he caved in, but Arcade is also crazy. He doesn't want to just end it here. He wants to get his work in, and he's going to use his medical acumen, because that's one of the things I think kind of goes under talked about in regards to Arcade. Is not only is he an assassin extraordinaire, is he a virtuoso with a sniper rifle or a pistol, not only is he a living Cuisinart with a blade, but he is also a trained medical professional. He is skilled in dentistry, and he's planning to use his knowledge of dentistry to torture Mr. Sinister, basically mutilating his mouth, taking out every tooth in his head. Because once again, he did appreciate that Mr. Sinister was willing to help, but he wanted Mr. Sinister to want to help him, not just do it because he wanted to be free. He wanted him to be desperate. He wanted him to help him because he knew there was no other way he was going to get out of this. And when we see what he has done, he has taken out most of the teeth in Mr. Sinister's head, it looks like, save for a couple. And so right now, Arcade has one of the most dastardly mutants in the history of all mutants at his disposal, preparing to make him a clone farm, which I'm pretty sure is gonna, be clones of all the crazy, nightmarish things he could possibly think of. But one of the things we also have to remember is that he might be also asking for clones of himself as well. We have known Arcade to use life model decoys in the past when it seemed like he was going to be captured or caught or even killed. We've discovered in the past that he is very wily. Whether he looks like a Chucky doll or not, that's a whole other story. The point of the matter is that the Hellions have been caught slipping, and I think this right here is probably one of my favorite examples of people getting caught off guard. Like, I talk about this all the time when people say, oh, I don't understand how so-and-so character get beaten by so-and-so. It's like, anybody can be caught slipping. As the famous boxer Mike Tyson has always said, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. But I'm very curious to see where it all goes, because, once again, he typically employs robots, highly sophisticated androids and machines, and technology that is just beyond all conventional science. He's used that to make Murder World what it is, and it sounds like what Arcade's trying to do is make an even more nightmarish and at the same time more realistic Murder World and all of that, which kind of interesting. It's interesting to think about. All this does is make me want to go back and play Spider-Man and the X-Men Arcade's Revenge, even though I know that game is awful. But anyways, that is everything you need to know about Hellions number 10, the whys and hows and what's really going on there beneath the surface. If you enjoyed this video, Hulk smash that like button and make sure to share it all over the internet and with all your friends so they can know how you leveled up your comic book big brain in regards to Hellions and Reign of X. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out and let me know what you thought about Hellions number 10. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.